Hampton, the executive producer of that documentary from the United States on Skype. And from our Pretoria studio, I'm joined by Mbuyielo Botha from the South African Men's Forum. Dream, thanks so much for your time on SABC News. That's quite a harrowing documentary to watch. Talk to us about the process of putting it together.
Well, yes, the process began, really, to be honest, almost 20 years ago, when in December of 2000, Jim DeRogatis from the Chicago Sun-Times published along with his colleague, an investigative story about settlements that R. Kelly was making with teenagers who had accused him of underage sex and some other things. And that story was published a month after I had just published a fairly glowing, or just a profile piece really, where I just kind of witnessed R. Kelly in the studio and absolutely mentioned his marriage to Aaliyah, his illegal marriage that he quickly had annulled. But I didn't know about that there was a predation, like that there was a pattern to his predation until Jim DeRogatis wrote this piece in December of 2000. About 18 months after Jim DeRogatis publishes that piece, we learn really how abusive R. Kelly is when a videotape goes viral on the streets of him abusing, degrading, humiliating, urinating in the mouth of, I'm sorry, I don't know what time of the evening this show comes on. I hope it's just adults, but doing really awful things to what appeared to be a preteen, but what was in fact a 14-year-old girl. And so that's when we really began to know who Kelly was. This marriage to Aaliyah wasn't just one-time thing. And for me, that's when it began. In terms of making this documentary at Lifetime, they invited me into the process a year ago. And they had already been holding my executive producer, another executive producer on the show, Tamara Simmons, and Jesse Daniels had already been talking to the women even before they sold the show to Lifetime. They were working at Buna Murray at Creative, and they had already had a relationship with many of the women who we have in the doc. And of course, we invited many more, and even more than that, refused to come on camera. But that was the beginning in earnest, was last February. But for me, this is a story that began in December of 2000, when in the Chicago Sun-Times, we realized that R. Kelly in Chicago had a pattern of preying on young girls. It wasn't just one time falling in love with Aaliyah, but that this was indeed his style.
Mm-hmm. One of the questions after this documentary has come out is, how was he able to continue for so long with the behavior that's spoken about by the people in this documentary?
You know, I have a tweet about that, and I pinned it to the top of my wall. And I said, if you watched our docuseries and found yourself asking, you know, how did this go on so long? You now know a known predator who showed us what he does on video is protected by whataboutism. And we hear that a lot. What about Harvey Weinstein? What about Jeffrey Epstein? What about this one? What about that one? Keep me out of it, which is what you saw with the celebs. And we need all of his accusers and detractors to have never harmed, to have spotless reputations, which is what, well, not even have spotless reputations, because what Charlemagne is accused of is far more serious than a reputation, a snare in his reputation. He's accused, a woman alleges, Jessica Reed alleges that he raped her 15 years ago. Touré, of course, admitted and apologized for sexually harassing one of his colleagues. But these things, the whataboutism, the keep me out of it, the shutting down anyone who tries to speak out on someone who's incredibly egregious, who has a pattern of predation. Those three things that you've seen come up since if you've been monitoring this in any way, you know, on social media in particular, you know that these are the three things that keep being employed against this documentary and sometimes against me. And of course, the blaming the parents, right? And the victims themselves. So really those 5 things combined is how this went on for so long. We can talk about the record industry and how they were complicit, certainly, but you can see based on what you're seeing on your Facebook feed, on your Twitter feed, on your Instagram feed, you can take a gander at the SurvivingRKelly hashtag on any of those platforms, and you'll see those 3 things over and over again, along with victim shaming and blaming.
Mbuyielo, let's bring you into the conversation. That's an issue that we can relate to in South Africa in terms of powerful or famous people who've been accused of certain behavior and appear to be able to get away with it quite easily.
Well, yes, Zinga, I think part of the reason is that there's a culture of silence. And then that silence is actually perpetrated by all of us, that the fear of being shamed, I mean, the stigma, to be stigmatized. So unless as a country we deal with that level of stigmatizing and shaming people who come out, we will remain with people feeling that, what's the point? It will not help me. So that, in fact, perpetuates the silence and perpetuates abuse.
There's also a narrative about people, if people know someone, they allow almost abuse to continue without making a fuss about it because they don't want to come out against someone they're quite close to or someone they admire.
Oh, yes, because again, it goes back that why do I have to shame this person? Why do I mean, what will they say? Will they believe me? Will they, in fact, do I have credibility? Because more often than not, it is the action of the survivor which will be questioned. We normally, don't ask questions about the perpetrator. It's the burden is placed on the survivor that you have to prove that indeed you were violated, when in fact it's supposed to be the other way around.
It's time for us to take a short break. We'll continue this discussion on the record after that. Do stay with us on The Full View.